So I wanted to talk about communication because you can't be on the spiritual thing all the time, constantly, because it'll burn you out. So communication is a very important part of this human experience. Very, um, it's very inclusive. It allows us to sympathize with people, to experience empathy in ways that we normally wouldn't. And one of the most key components to communication is listening. Are you hearing what they're actually saying? Because not only do we lie to ourselves, but in the process of trying to find out who we are, we judge other people, unknowingly judging ourselves. So every time you look at a person and you make a judgment, you're seeing in them something that you're seeing in yourself, right? So hearing people is very, very important. And I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it, as much as there's just the trying. So it's just like spirituality. It's just like your meditations. It's a practice, and you implement that practice into your daily life. Consciously listen. I mean, how often do we judge a person and immediately just turn off or tune out because we have some predetermined notion that they don't know what they're talking about? So being present, being in the right now, and not being attached to our own opinions of not only other people, but our preconceived notions of ourselves. We are not easy enough on ourselves. We judge the hell out of ourselves for things that we really don't need to judge ourselves for. That's what sin is. Sin is the judgment of a thing, to feel the shame, to continue the loop, the spiral of your own traumatic responses. So first things first, when you're communicating people or with people, ask yourself, why am I listening? What is the process here? Am I trying to get am I listening to respond, or am I listening to understand? That is a very key component, because we generally listen to respond with our own opinions, our own ideas, perceptions about this person's statement, when we should be listening just to hear what they're saying. You can get lost in the jumble of your own thoughts. That's why a meditative practice or a singular focused practice is so very important. And I have a friend that was experiencing a lot of the awakening type symptoms, and it was baffling me, because I was like, well, you don't meditate, but he's Catholic, and he prayed a lot, so I thought, well, maybe in prayer he's getting into a meditative state. But then I found out that he's an active runner. He runs regularly, and I went, oh, he's experiencing that runner's high, and in that runner's high is a meditative type experience. So you can experience meditation in some very, very unlikely ways. Maybe you're a musician and you play guitar and you get into that zone, that feeling. Maybe you're an artist, a painter, and while you're painting, you're just in it. You are divided from the monkey mind for enough period of time to get that reflective void consciousness, right? Stevie Ray Vaughan is a good example. They asked him, how he's such a great player, and he's like, well, I'm not doing this. I'm just the instrument. I'm just putting it on the strings. And there's something really big in that, because you really almost can't take credit for anything that would, society would deem profound, because it's really not you. It's the collective energy. It's source. It's that God particle. Whatever that may be, because it's going to be a different type of definition to all sorts of different people. You ask a Christian, it's Jesus. A Buddhist is going to say Buddha. A Taoist is going to say Lao Tzu. And it goes on and on for all of the religions that are out there and the perceptions. My favorite understanding of that was that Christ was not a Christian. Buddha was not a Buddhist. Lao Tzu was not a Taoist. They found a path for themselves and then hipped other people to that process to see if maybe, it wasn't even to see, it's to allow other people to come in that may respond to that process too. And that's how gurus are born. They're born finding a unique individual process for themselves that may be outside of the norm, and then sharing it. And that's love. That's what love is. Love is the very definition, is sharing what you have with others. So if you're multitasking, discounting the person that you're speaking to, or attached to your own opinions, you're not listening effectively. And that's a slippery slope to get into, because if you're not listening effectively, you can't respond effectively. So you have to maintain your focus. Find a place where you can sit with this person, maybe a park, nature, a nice clean office space, someplace that's comfortable, and have a formal conversation where nobody's really being judged, and you can just hear the person and what they've got to say. Make sure it's a place there where there are no interruptions. It's private. And make sure you have enough time to hear this person out. Like, don't set aside 5 minutes because you have an appointment, and you need to really communicate with somebody. The secret weapon to listening is curiosity. Actually be involved with what a person is saying. Be curious about what they're saying. Be curious about their body language, how they're putting themselves forward. Don't lead them with questions of, like, trying to dissect what they're saying before they actually say it, because that's a dangerous path too, because that leads to assumptions, and we all know assumptions are bullshit. So another good way is to paraphrase. So when they say a statement, repeat the statement in your own way back to them to make sure that you're hearing them appropriately. Another quick tip of advice would be not to engage with somebody in a conversation if your emotions are out there and big and you're having an issue, So if you just got diagnosed with cancer, you probably don't want to talk to your friend about, their car issues or their job problems or their relationship issues. So, make sure that you set aside a good amount of time in a place where you feel you can listen and be heard. Because you can't effectively listen if you're emotionally engaged. Because you want to be able to keep your attention on the other person You want to be able to quiet your inner dialogue enough so you're not reacting, you're just responding accordingly. And like I said, this is very important, that mindset of curiosity. It completely depends on how effective your listening is. And then be compassionate. Find commonalities so you can be compassionate and empathetic. You know, maybe you've went through the same scenario, or you know somebody else that has went through the same scenario, and you were empathetic at that point, and you're able to relate on a higher level. I think in today's society, the way things are, we're just not listening to each other. There's a lot of people out there that are hurting, a lot of people in pain, a lot of people that don't know what direction to go. And we are all each other has, like, period, you know? We have our spirituality, our spiritual practice, our path. We have our hobbies, our likes and our dislikes. But at the end of the day, we really need to fall back on each other in a way that is healthy, that's allowing people not only to be heard and seen, but allowing people to be comfortable enough not to be judged by somebody for a situation that they might be going through. If you look back at, you know, the 70s and 80s, gay people were treated very poorly. They were treated as pariahs, or like there was something wrong. In fact, it was considered a mental illness back in those times. And so there was never a safe space for these types of people to be able to communicate in an effective way, to be themselves appropriately, you know? And the same thing goes for race. You know, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, African American people were treated like shit. I mean, there were a lot of people that were murdered and lynched that were innocent. So let's maybe take a look at what's happening right now and see where people are being undermined. You know, I mean, you don't have to agree with anybody's lifestyle. Nobody's saying that. But you do have to accept it, or you're going to go down a rabbit hole you don't want to go down, because it's going to create some type of traumatic response mechanism in you. In fact, I just had a great conversation with a really good friend yesterday, and I talked about when I went to high school in Chicago, and I went the South Side of Chicago, and my high school was predominantly African American, and I think it was like in the 80 percentile, and there was like 20% of every other race, you know. So I stuck out like a sore thumb, and I got picked on by a minority of African Americans, and I was messed with, and, you know, hey white boy and that kind of thing. And I went, you know, can you imagine if I would have held on to that? If I would have taken that one situation and decided, you know, from maybe a minute percentage of the African American population, that they were all going to be that way, right? It's reversible too. It's, you know, you could be Mexican and being messed with by white people and assume that all white people are that way, and it's just not true. But you see how slippery the slope is. You can have a traumatic event and base your entire life on it. You know what I mean? So we have to be open-minded about a lot of things. Don't pay attention to what's happening in the media or on social media, or even YouTube for that matter. Try to find things that are healthy and beneficial for you, because you are important. And I've said it in many videos before, you have to love yourself before you can love others. And to find that love for yourself, the first step is acceptance. This is the way I am. I would like to change it. What do I need to implement in my life to make that change? What's the first step? And that goes along with this video of communicating. The first step in communicating properly is hearing. It's listening. So let's be kind to each other. You know, let's be open-minded. Let's be diplomatic. Let's hear each other in a way that's conducive to the overall paradigm that we're living in. So accept your brothers and your sisters. That's where healing begins. So, as always, much love.